one of the reasons is because the decline of pensions, like, they just don't exist anymore. Also, right, in the 80s and 70s, companies didn't lay their people off as part of the business model like they do these days. When I started working at Abbott Labs in 1998, they had never had a layoff before in their company's history, and they had been around for over 100 years by that point. They did not have their first layoff until 2002, late 2002. I worked there then too. I worked there for a total of 18 years. That's what I thought. That's what I had been programmed to do when I grew up. Go find a job at a great company, let them put you through school and work there until you retire and have a great life. Like that was the plan. Except now these companies don't feel bad anymore about laying people off if it's going to help increase their profits faster. And so it's just part of business now. It wasn't always that way. But, anyways, just know that that's very different than what it was even 20 years ago. Global environment, technology, and free trade have blurred lines between individual economies in the world. So, what was I just saying about China, right? The iPhone is not in everybody's pockets unless it's getting made in China or some other country where we can pay the workers 5 or 10 hours a day, or $5 or $10 a day for 10 or 12 hours. But what I found out ends up happening is we had the same way that we treat China with our manufacturing, we treated India with our IT and finance in the early 2000s. Companies said, "We don't want to pay you $25 an hour anymore to do accounts payable. We are going to send your job to India." And so they started sending all of the kind of data entry like jobs over to India, for, I don't know, $5,000 a year or something like that, back when an American would have made like, I don't know, 50 or $60,000 a year to do that. Well, guess what? They started demanding more money. After we sent all the jobs over there, they're like, we got you now. We don't want $5,000 a year anymore. We want 10,000. Then pretty soon they wanted 20,000. Then pretty soon they wanted 30,000. Then pretty soon they wanted 40,000. Well, guess what? Now it's not that much cheaper to have our IT in India, number one. Number two, it's very inconvenient to have someone doing work for you when it's pitch like it's they're 12 hours ahead of us, 12, 13 hours different. So when it's 8 a.m. here, it's 8 p.m. there. When it's 2 p.m. here, it's 2 in the morning there. So it's always been very inconvenient. But if you're paying someone 1/10, 1/12 of the cost, you'll put up with some inconvenience. Well, you start thinking about it, well, now all of a sudden when the pay is starting to reach what you could pay an American to do it. Totally different ball game. Same thing will happen with China. They won't do our manufacturing for $5,000 a year forever. At some point, they'll realize they can start charging more, and they will. And then we'll move it somewhere else, right? That's just how it works. Migration of jobs relates closely to the global movement toward free trade. The United States is not the only powerful country that does this. Everybody kind of has their countries that they work with. It depends on what's going on in that particular country. Like Africa is very rich in natural resources, for instance. So some countries like China are very, very close to Africa because they want to go there and take all of you know, their timber and their diamonds and their oil, and they've got huge reserves of that stuff in some of the places, and many of the places in Africa. Africa's enormous. Like, you guys are kind of used to this depiction of, the world map, but you can fit the United States into Africa like more than 2 times. Like, Africa is an enormous place, and it is just full of resources for the taking, and there's a lot of kind of richer countries. I think the United States stays away from Africa because of guilt. But there's a lot of countries out there that didn't enslave Africans, and they're over there, seeing what they can get. Let's see. So some of the agreements, like the worldwide agreements that have made it possible to do this international trade where we sell to and from each other, like this is one of the biggest ones, I'd say, this general agreement on tariffs and trade. Does anybody know what tariffs are? Can anybody explain to me the concept of a tariff? It's kind of tricky. I won't let you sit there until you figure it out if you can't figure it out this time, because that's a toughie. No? A tariff is a tax that a country charges on a product that their citizens buy from a different country. So like when Donald Trump was president, he really took issue with China dumping cheap steel here. So he said, "All right, all you countries that are buying steel from China, stop it. You need to start buying from American or Canadian steel producers." And everybody was like, "Whatever." So he was like, "All right, cool. I'm going to put a tariff on it. If you buy their steel, you owe the United States a 25% tariff. So if you bought $100 worth of steel from China, that would have cost you maybe 175 here in the United States, let's say. You owe us, the government of the United States, $25 for the $100 that you spent over there. It's basically a punishment for buying outside of your own country. Um, if you could buy it here instead. And that is the purpose. It's a protective tax that a country puts on imports. And it's to protect the economy at home. Yes, Emily.
Is that tariff still an agreement?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Actually, the guy who was over in China negotiating on behalf of Donald Trump is from Kenosha too. He was in my class. His name is Cleet Willems.
That's so cool.
That's the only reason I know anything about this is because I'm on Facebook with him, and sometimes he's on like MSNBC or Bloomberg talking about it, and he always reposts it on Facebook. But yeah, and it's interesting too because that is not like I don't know how much you guys know about politics, and I'm not going to say one way or the other how I feel about Donald Trump, but I will say that part of the platform of being Republican is laissez-faire. Like you guys might have learned this in US government and politics. Laissez-faire. It's a French word. It means leave alone or let it be. So historically, Republicans have said, look, we don't need to make a bunch of laws about this. Let it be. Laissez-faire. We don't need a bunch of regulation. Let people do what they're going to do. So tariffs, imposing tariffs are traditionally something like very Democrat to do and not at all Republican to do. So it's interesting because the way that kind of works then is President Trump did something that was very, very uncharacteristic of a Republican president. Then we rolled into a Democratic president or a Democrat president. Well, he's not gonna Democrats love to protect and make laws and kind of oversight and stuff and agreements. And Republicans are more just like, let the market be the market. Don't mess with it. Don't interfere. Let people buy what they want to buy. Let people sell what they want to sell. That's a good question though. Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one. Honestly, what's gonna have to happen is I don't know what's gonna have to happen because does anybody understand why President Trump hated China so much?
I think he wanted to start steering away from them.
Yeah. Anybody know why he wanted to start steering away from them? You're exactly right. So remember I said that they were communist. That means the government is very, very involved in their economic system and they own a lot of the companies. And even if they don't own them, sometimes they're owned privately, the government still gives them money so that they have the advantage on American companies, which are all privately owned. So if you've got a privately owned company in the United States that doesn't have government support, competing against a privately owned company in China that does have government support. Maybe maybe the government is investing with them. Maybe it's giving them loans with no interest rate. Maybe it's letting them sell at a loss. US politicians and US business people that compete with China hate that because China basically cheats. China does a lot of things that we wouldn't allow American companies to do to one another. We don't think it's fair. We think it's bad business. Um, and so the other thing is China makes sure that it keeps the value of its currency very low compared to US money because that makes us want to buy stuff from them. That makes American consumers want to buy stuff from them. And then they benefit from that because 'cause they've got all that US money going over there. Um, but, like, in the case of steel, to have American private companies competing against, steel companies in China that are either run by the state or heavily subsidized by the state, they don't have to worry about making a profit, so they can sell it at, like, half the price an American company can. Because America, right? We have to show a profit here in the United States because there's somebody that owns that. There's some shareholders or, right? Somebody who expects you not to give away steel.